One rainy night in Rio de Janeiro, a doctor finds an injured girl with a pendant identical to the one he gave to his missing daughter 10 years ago. But when he investigates its origin, he discovers a web of secrets that could change everything. What connection does the girl have with her past? The rain was falling hard on the streets of Rio de Janeiro, turning the asphalt into a shiny mirror, splashed with car lights. It was one of those nights where the city seemed to be submerged in a humid chaos, and Dr. Lucas Mendez, exhausted after a long shift at the hospital, was walking quickly to his car. The distant sound of a siren competed with the echo of his thoughts, which were lost among the day's cases in the feeling of emptiness that had accompanied him for years. As he turned onto the main avenue, a loud crash brought him out of his reverie. A car had gone out of control, crashing into a pole. Lucas ran to the vehicle, his medical instincts immediately kicking in. The scene was confusing. Smoke was pouring from the hood of the car, and inside, a little girl lay motionless in the back seat. "Help! Please, someone help!" a female voice shouted from inside the car. Lucas struggled open the back door and carefully pulled the girl out. He quickly checked her under the dim light of a nearby post. She had a weak pulse, but she was alive. Her heart was beating fast, fueled by adrenaline as she applied first aid. That's when he saw it. A small golden pendant hung from the girl's neck, gently swinging with each breath. It was impossible not to recognize it, identical to the one he himself had given his daughter Sophia on her 5th birthday. The image hit him like a punch to the chest, leaving him momentarily paralyzed. His hands shook, but he quickly regained control. A life was at stake. The girl's mother, Helena, came running from the other side of the accident, her face pale and her eyes full of tears. "How are you? Tell me you'll be okay," she pleaded, her voice breaking with every word. "We'll do everything we can," Lucas replied, avoiding looking at the pendant again. He picked up the little girl in his arms and headed to his car. The ambulance wouldn't arrive in time, and every second counted. On the way to the hospital, Lucas couldn't get the images of Sophia out of his mind. 10 years had passed since her disappearance, but the pain was still as vivid as that night when everything changed. The similarity between the girl and his daughter was disturbing, as if fate was playing with him. Upon arriving at the emergency room, Lucas handed the little girl over to the medical team. As he stepped away to let the specialist work, he turned to look at Helena, who remained nearby, clinging to hope. But Lucas couldn't ignore what he had seen. That pendant, that buried memory that now returned with more questions than answers. Translated from Spanish to English, to www.onlinedoctrinslator.com. The emergency room was bustling with activity. Lucas stood in the corner, watching through the glass as they treated the little girl. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each one more chaotic. The little girl was out of danger, but he was not. That pendant had opened a wound that had never healed. Sophia. Lucas closed his eyes, trying to contain the flood of memories. The images came back to him with cruel clarity. Sophia laughing as she ran along the beach, her brown hair blowing in the wind. Her contagious laugh still echoed in his mind, even though he hadn't heard it for years. 10 years ago, his world had fallen apart. It was a sunny day, just another day. They had gone to the park like so many other times. Lucas left her playing in the playground while he bought an ice cream. When he returned, she was gone. Everything happened so fast, so unreal. The search was frantic, desperate. For months, he clung to hope, scouring the city, putting up posters, calling any number that promised a lead. But it was all in vain. The absence of answers consumed him. Now that pendant had brought back the past with devastating force. Lucas clenched his hands in an attempt to regain control. He couldn't let his emotions get the better of him. Not now. However, the more he looked at the girl, the more the need to know grew in him. Who was she? Why was she wearing something so familiar, so intimate? Could it really be a coincidence? "Lucas?" Dr. Ana Silva's voice brought him out of his thoughts. His colleague and longtime friend looked at him with concern. "Are you okay? You seem upset." Lucas swallowed and nodded. Even though he knew it was a lie, he couldn't share what he felt, not yet. Anna had a clinical eye not only for illnesses, but for secrets as well. If he gave her the slightest hint, she would pressure him to talk, and he didn't know what to say yet. "I'm fine. It was just a long day," she finally replied, avoiding his inquisitive gaze. Anna seemed to hesitate, but she didn't insist. Instead, she put a hand on his shoulder before leaving. Lucas turned his attention back to the little girl, who was now resting on a stretcher. Helena, sitting next to her, held her small hand gently. The scene reminded him of so many nights when he himself watched over Sophia, telling her stories to help her fall asleep. The pain was an old acquaintance, but this time it was accompanied by something else, a nagging restlessness, a question he couldn't ignore. He needed answers, and although he knew it was risky, something inside him told him he couldn't let it go. The door to the living room opened, and Helena stepped out with an expression of relief mixed with exhaustion. Lucas watched her from a distance, his thoughts mixed between duty and a personal impulse he couldn't control. The hospital was a place of constant movement, but for Lucas, that morning everything seemed to pass in an eerie silence. Ever since Helena and Maria arrived, something inside him had not left him alone. He needed to know more. It was not simply curiosity, it was a mixture of anxiety and hope that drove him to act. Lucas waited until he was sure Maria was stable before approaching the administrative area. Using the excuse of updating the girl's medical history, he checked the records. He found what he was looking for. Maria had been adopted. The information puzzled him, but it also gave him a spark of hope. Could there be a link to Sophia? He guarded the information carefully, aware that he was entering dangerous territory. He knew he was crossing an ethical line, but he couldn't stop himself. He needed to understand how this girl had gotten to Helena, and if that would bring him closer to his missing daughter. Later, as he walked through the corridors, he found Helena in the waiting room. She was sitting with her hands folded, staring into space. Lucas took advantage of the moment to try to talk to her. "Helena, how is Maria?" he asked in a professional tone, although his interest went much further. "Better, thanks to you," Helena replied without looking directly at him. Her words were short, almost calculated. Lucas took a deep breath before continuing. "I know this may seem strange, but could you tell me a little more about Maria?" he said, trying hard to sound casual. "Sometimes knowing more details helps in treatment." Helena looked up, her eyes dark with a mixture of tiredness and distrust. "Why do you ask?" he replied coldly. "Maria is fine. That's all that matters." Helena's reaction was a wall that Lucas didn't know how to break through. The conversation ended abruptly when she stood up and left the room, leaving Lucas with more questions than answers. Something in her attitude told him that she was hiding something, but he didn't know if it was out of protection or something deeper. That same afternoon, Lucas sought out Dr. Anna in her office. She was his friend and confidant, although he knew her ethics were strict. "Anna, I need your opinion on something," he began, trying to measure his words. "What would you do if you felt that a patient was connected to something from your past? Something important?" Anna looked at him carefully, hearing the seriousness in his voice. "Lucas, if you're talking about a real case, you have to remember that our work has limits. We can't let our emotions interfere with patients." "Why do you ask?" "It's just a hypothesis," Lucas lied, although he knew that Anna had seen through him. Anna's warning echoed in his mind, but doubt and obsession were already consuming him. That night, as he reviewed the notes he'd compiled, he made a decision. If he couldn't get answers from Helena, he would find another way. For the first time in years, he felt like he might be closer to uncovering the truth about Sophia, even if it meant risking everything. Hours turned into days, but Lucas's uneasiness did not diminish. Every time he thought about Maria, the pendant, and Helena's evasive answers, he felt as if something was pushing him into an abyss from which he could not return. He knew he was crossing boundaries that could compromise him, but the possibility of being close to Sophia consumed him. It was then that he made a risky decision. He hired a private detective. In a discreet cafe in the city center, he met João Alencar, a man with a serious expression and deep voice, known for his efficiency. "I need you to investigate a woman named Helena Costa and her daughter Maria," Lucas said, trying to sound confident. He held out a photo he had discreetly taken at the hospital. João studied the image for a moment before nodding. "Understood. I will do my job, but this may take a few days." Lucas nodded, even though he knew that waiting would be a torment. During those days, his behavior began to change. In the hospital, his mind wandered between surgeries, visits to patients, and the thoughts that tied him to Helena and Maria. His colleagues noticed his distraction, but no one dared to comment on it directly. One afternoon, while reviewing medical reports, she received a call from João. "I found something interesting. Helena moved to Rio de Janeiro just 6 months ago, but there isn't much information about her life before that. It seems she's avoiding leaving traces." The information further fueled Lucas's obsession. That same night, he decided to follow Helena on his own. He saw her leave the hospital with Maria, who now looked more recovered. Keeping a safe distance, he followed them to a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood. The lights came on, and Lucas stayed in his car, watching from the darkness. Time passed slowly, and Lucas wondered if what he was doing was justifiable. Was he looking for answers, or was he just losing control? His reasoning always came back to the same point. If there was even the slightest chance that Maria was connected to Sofia, he had to know about it. At the hospital, his behavior did not go unnoticed. Dr. Anna confronted him in an empty hallway. "Lucas, I don't know what's going on with you, but this is affecting your work. You need to get your priorities in order," she said firmly. "If there's anything you need to talk about, I'm here, but you can't keep going like this." Lucas didn't answer. He just nodded and walked away, though Anna's words echoed in his mind like a warning. But the idea of stopping was unthinkable. That night, as he reviewed the notes João had sent him, he found something else. A name associated with Helena's past, a man linked to suspicious activities. For Lucas, this was a sign. The search for answers was not only consuming his professional life, but also his soul. Yet he felt that fate had brought him here for a reason. The night was shrouded in an eerie silence as Lucas parked his car in front of Helena's building. He had spent the last few days torn between ethics and obsession, but his need for answers was stronger. He stepped out of the car with determined steps, though his heart was pounding. He walked up the stairs until he reached the apartment. He knocked firmly on the door. Helena opened the door, surprised to see him there. Her face reflected a mixture of discomfort and distrust. "Dr. Mendes, what are you doing here?" he asked, crossing his arms in the doorway like a shield. Lucas swallowed, trying to maintain his composure. "I need to talk to you. It's important," he said in a tone that brooked no discussion. Helena watched him in silence for a moment before sighing and opening the door a little further. She invited him in, though her posture remained defensive. Maria was nowhere to be seen, but Lucas noticed toys on the couch and a school bag on the floor. The house was modest but tidy. "Tell me what you want," Helena said, sitting down in a chair opposite him. Her voice was firm, but her eyes betrayed a certain anxiety. Lucas wasted no time. "I want to know about Maria, about her pendant. It's identical to one I gave to my daughter, Sofia, before she disappeared. Where did she get it? Why does Maria have it?" The words came out in a rush, charged with emotion. Helena stared at him, as if weighing each word before answering. "That pendant means nothing. It's just an object, doctor. Maria has nothing to do with your daughter," he replied coldly. Lucas couldn't believe what he was hearing. His frustration grew. "I can't accept that as an answer. Maria was adopted, I know that. Why can't she be honest with me?" he insisted, taking a step towards her. Helena stood up abruptly, her face hardened. "That's enough. I don't know how you got that information, but you're crossing a line. If you keep pressuring me, I'll call the police. Get out of my house," he said, pointing to the door. At that moment, Maria appeared in the hallway. Her big eyes watched the scene with curiosity and fear. Lucas looked at her, and his heart sank. There was something about her that reminded him so much of Sofia that it was impossible to ignore it. "Maria, go back to your room," Helena ordered softly, trying to remain calm. The girl obeyed, disappearing into the darkness. Lucas took a deep breath, aware that he had gone too far. Helena looked at him, her expression now more tired than angry. "I don't know why you insist on this, but I assure you that you won't find what you're looking for here. Please leave," he said, opening the door. Lucas nodded, defeated. He left the apartment with his mind filled with doubt. As he walked down the stairs, he realized he had crossed a dangerous line. But even after that confrontation, he couldn't ignore the feeling that he was closer to the truth. Lucas spent the day at the hospital, but his mind was elsewhere. The confrontation with Helena had left him restless, with a mix of frustration and guilt. He knew he had crossed boundaries, but the memory of the pendant and Maria's gaze continued to haunt him. He tried to focus on his patients, but the obsession continued to consume him. At the end of the shift, he found Anna waiting for him in the hallway. "We need to talk," she said in a firm tone, almost an order. Lucas followed her into the break room. Anna closed the door behind them, crossed her arms, and looked at him with concern. "Lucas, something is happening to you, and you can't keep going like this. You're not focused on your work, and I've heard rumors that you're getting involved in things outside the hospital. This isn't like you. Tell me, what's going on?" Lucas looked down for a moment, knowing that Anna wouldn't let the subject go. Although he hesitated, he understood that hiding the truth would only make the situation worse. "I found a girl, Maria. She was in an accident, and the pendant she's wearing is identical to the one I gave Sophia before she disappeared. I can't ignore it, Anna. I feel like there's a connection, though I don't know how to explain it." Anna sighed deeply, taking in his words. "Lucas, I understand how important Sophia is to you, but what you're doing isn't healthy. You can't let the pain of your past lead you to make serious mistakes. How far are you willing to go?" Before Lucas could answer, the sound of footsteps in the hallway caught his attention. The door slowly opened and Helena entered. Her face was pale, and her eyes showed a mixture of tiredness and resolve. "I need to talk to you, doctor," he said, ignoring Anna's presence. Anna looked at Lucas, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, but stepped back, letting Helena speak. "I'm sorry about what happened last night," Helena continued. "It wasn't fair to Maria or me, but I understand that you need answers. Maybe it's time you knew something I've been holding back for a long time." Lucas stared at her, his chest tight with anticipation. Helena took a breath before continuing. "Maria is not my biological daughter. I found her 5 years ago in difficult circumstances. She was alone, vulnerable, and I couldn't leave her in that state. I can't give you details, but I was afraid that my past would catch up with her. That's why I moved here to start over." The revelation left Lucas stunned. Although it didn't directly answer his questions, it was another piece in the puzzle. Maria wasn't Helena's daughter, but he still didn't know how that connected to Sophia. Helena paused, looking at him seriously. "I don't know what you're looking for exactly, but I assure you that I don't want to hurt you. I'm just trying to protect Maria, as you would have done for your daughter." Lucas nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and confusion. It was a step towards the truth, but there were still many shadows to dispel. Helena's revelation left Lucas in a state of uncertainty. On the one hand, her words confirmed that Maria was not his biological daughter, but on the other, the mystery surrounding her past raised more questions than answers. That night, Lucas couldn't sleep. He stayed up looking through the few clues he had, trying to find a connection between Maria, Helena, and Sophia. The next morning, Lucas made a risky decision. He looked for Helena at the hospital, hoping she would agree to talk to him again. He found her sitting in the waiting room, looking tired. When he approached, she eyed him warily. "Alrighty, we need to talk," Lucas said, his tone calmer than the night before. "I think there's something more to all this, something that might be important to both of us." Helena sighed but nodded. "Okay, but in private." They headed into a small empty meeting room in the hospital. Helena closed the door behind them, crossing her arms as she waited for Lucas to speak. "I know my behavior hasn't been the best," Lucas began, "but there's something about this situation that I can't ignore. Maria is wearing a pendant identical to that of my daughter Sophia, who disappeared 10 years ago. Now you're telling me that Maria isn't your biological daughter and that you found her under unusual circumstances. Don't you think there could be a connection?" Helena looked at him in silence for a few seconds before answering. "I don't know what connection there could be, but I understand why you're so insistent. There are things from my past that I'd rather not dig up, but if you really think this could lead you to your daughter, maybe it's time to look for answers together." Lucas was surprised by Helena's willingness to cooperate, but he wasted no time. "What did you know about Maria before you found her?" he asked, taking out a notebook to write down. "Not much," Helena admitted. "She was just a child, wandering alone in a dangerous place. I did what I thought was right. I took her with me and legally adopted her. But I was always afraid that someone might come looking for her. Lucas frowned, considering her words. It seemed Helena was also harboring deep fears, though perhaps not directly related to Maria. That same afternoon, Lucas shared the new information with Dr. Anna, who was initially skeptical. Lucas, this is still a very thin line, but if you are determined to move forward, I can try to help you. I have contacts in the judicial and social system who could provide us with more information. With Anna's help, they began looking for records related to adoption networks and disappearances of children in recent years. Meanwhile, Helena provided information she remembered about the place where she found Maria. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together. They discovered patterns that pointed to something much bigger and darker, a possible human trafficking network operating in the region. It was a terrifying reality, but for Lucas, it was also a new hope. For the first time, the three of them joined forces. Although their motivations were different, they all shared one goal: to discover the truth. Lucas couldn't ignore the feeling that, at the end of this path, he might be closer to finding Sophia. Lucas, Helena, and Anna's investigation led them to a dark alley on the outskirts of Rio de Janeiro, a place that exuded danger. The abandoned building in front of them, with broken windows and walls covered in graffiti, was the epicenter of their suspicions. According to the information they had gathered, a clandestine human trafficking network operated there, the same one that could hold answers about Maria and perhaps Sophia. Helena clenched her fists as she looked at the building, her face a mixture of fear and determination. Anna checked her phone, making sure the authorities were alerted, even though they knew they couldn't expect immediate reinforcements. Lucas, for his part, felt a knot in his stomach. The possibility of facing those responsible for the suffering of so many families filled him with rage, but also with caution. "We don't have much time," Anna muttered, putting the phone back in her pocket. "If they're really here, it won't take long for them to realize we're nearby." Lucas nodded, adjusting the flashlight in his hand. He looked at Helena, who was carrying a small backpack with basic supplies they had prepared. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, aware that things could quickly turn dangerous. "I've never been more ready in my life," Helena replied firmly. They entered through a half-open side door, trying not to make any noise. The interior of the building was dim, lit only by the light filtering through cracks in the walls. The air was thick with moisture and dust, and each step they took seemed to resonate like a deafening echo in the silence. As they moved forward, they found disturbing signs: remnants of burned documents, empty boxes, and abandoned furniture. But in one of the rooms, what they found made their blood run cold. A small stack of notebooks with names and ages written down, some with photographs attached. It was a record of the victims. Anna took one of the notebooks with shaking hands, while Lucas frantically searched the pages for a familiar name. "There it is," she exclaimed in an agitated whisper, pointing to a page. Sophia Mendez's name was written next to a faded photo. Her heart was pounding, a mixture of relief and terror. Before they could process the discovery, they heard heavy footsteps approaching. The three exchanged tense glances. They were not alone. "Quick, let's hide," said Anna, pointing to a dark corner behind some boxes. They ducked just in time as two men entered the room. They spoke in low voices, but their tone was menacing. One of them stopped near the boxes, and Lucas. He felt his breathing hitch. He knew that if they were discovered, they wouldn't get out of there easily. After a few minutes that seemed like an eternity, the men left the room and all three of them let out the breath they had been holding. "We have to go now," Helena said in an urgent whisper. But it wasn't that simple. When they tried to leave, the men appeared again, this time armed. The chase began. Lucas, Helena, and Anna ran through the dark corridors, dodging obstacles and desperately searching for a way out. The screams of their pursuers echoed behind them, getting closer and closer. Finally, they found a back door that led to an alley. They got out just in time, but they knew they weren't safe. The shadows of the men loomed behind them, and the tension in the air was unbearable. "This isn't over," Lucas said, panting as he helped Helena up off the ground. "We know more now, but they also know we're after them." With the first light of dawn appearing on the horizon, they left the place, aware that their next move had to be decisive. The final confrontation was getting closer, and the answers they had been looking for seemed to be within their reach. The air was thick with tension as Lucas, Helena, and Anna prepared for their next move. The discovery of the registry with the names of the victims, including Sophia's, had given them a new direction. They couldn't let the criminal network disappear into the shadows again. That night, they decided to return to the abandoned building, this time with a riskier plan. Anna, with her network of contacts, had alerted the authorities, but the response was slow. If they wanted to secure the evidence and rescue any potential victims still at the scene, they would have to act before it was too late. "Are you sure about this?" Anna asked as she checked the flashlight in her hands. "We could wait for reinforcements." Lucas shook his head. "If we wait, they could destroy everything. We can't risk it." Helena, who until then had remained silent, added, "I'm ready. If this brings us closer to the truth, I'm not afraid." Cautiously, they approached the building. This time, the entrance was more heavily guarded. 2 men patrolled the area, their figures barely visible under the flickering light of a pole. Anna pointed to the side of the building, where they found a broken window through which they were able to enter undetected. The interior was quieter than the last time, but danger was felt in every corner. They advanced cautiously to the same room where they had found the records. The pages were still there, but this time they were not alone. At the back, a man of robust build was waiting for them, accompanied by 2 more armed men. "I knew you'd be back," the man said with a sarcastic smile. "It's always interesting how people insist on butting in where they're not wanted." Lucas stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the man. "We want answers. We know what they're doing here, and we're not going to stop until everything is out in the open." The man laughed, as if Lucas's words were a joke. But the laughter faded when Anna, from a strategic position, activated a signal on her phone. She had managed to contact the police minutes before, and she knew they were on their way. "Do you really think you can stop us?" the man asked, gesturing to his companions. In the blink of an eye, the tension exploded into violence. The men lunged at them, and Lucas fought back with all the strength he could muster. Despite not being trained for combat, adrenaline fueled him. Helena, meanwhile, managed to snatch a metal bar from the ground and used it to defend herself. Anna, though less aggressive, managed to dodge and stay safe. Chaos filled the room. The blows echoed, the screams mixed with the sound of footsteps on the concrete floor. Lucas managed to knock one of the men down, but received a blow that left him momentarily stunned. It was Helena who, with unexpected bravery, helped him up just in time to face the leader. "This is the end of it," Lucas said, panting. "There it is," she exclaimed in an agitated whisper, pointing to a page. Sofia Mendez's name was written next to a faded photo. Her heart was pounding, a mixture of relief and terror. Before they could process the discovery, they heard heavy footsteps approaching. The 3 exchanged tense glances. They were not alone. "Quick, let's hide," said Anna, pointing to a dark corner behind some boxes. They ducked just in time as 2 men entered the room. They spoke in low voices, but their tone was menacing. One of them stopped near the boxes, and Lucas. He felt his breathing hitch. He knew that if they were discovered, they wouldn't get out of there easily. After a few minutes that seemed like an eternity, the men left the room and all 3 of them let out the breath they had been holding. "We have to go now," Helena said in an urgent whisper. But it wasn't that simple. When they tried to leave, the men appeared again, this time armed. The chase began. Lucas, Helena, and Anna ran through the dark corridors, dodging obstacles and desperately searching for a way out. The screams of their pursuers echoed behind them, getting closer and closer. Finally, they found a back door that led to an alley. They got out just in time, but they knew they weren't safe. The shadows of the men loomed behind them, and the tension in the air was unbearable. "This isn't over," Lucas said, panting as he helped Helena up off the ground. "We know more now, but they also know we're after them." With the first light of dawn appearing on the horizon, they left the place, aware that their next move had to be decisive. The final confrontation was getting closer, and the answers they had been looking for seemed to be within their reach. The air was thick with tension as Lucas, Helena, and Anna prepared for their next move. The discovery of the registry with the names of the victims, including Sophia's, had given them a new direction. They couldn't let the criminal network disappear into the shadows again. That night, they decided to return to the abandoned building, this time with a riskier plan. Anna, with her network of contacts, had alerted the authorities, but the response was slow. If they wanted to secure the evidence and rescue any potential victims still at the scene, they would have to act before it was too late. "Are you sure about this?" Anna asked as she checked the flashlight in her hands. "We could wait for reinforcements." Lucas shook his head. Before the man could respond, police sirens began to sound in the distance. His face filled with rage as he realized he had no way out. In a last-ditch attempt to escape, he tried to leave through a back door, but the officers had already surrounded the building. The network was dismantled that same night. The records found became key evidence, and several victims still at the scene were rescued. But what shocked Lucas most was a small notebook found in the leader's pocket. Among the pages, there was a reference to an unknown location, with Sophia's name circled. Lucas looked at the notebook, his heart pounding. Although the confrontation was over, he knew his search was just beginning. Dawn bathed the streets of Rio de Janeiro in a warm light, but Lucas barely noticed the landscape as he held the small notebook in his hands. The pages, worn and stained, held fragments of a dark past. There, among the names of the victims, there was Sofia Mendes, his daughter. A mixture of hope and fear filled him. What did that note mean? Could he finally find her? After the raid, the abandoned building was surrounded by patrol cars. The criminals had been arrested, and several rescued victims were awaiting medical attention. Helena, sitting on the edge of an ambulance, watched Maria play with a stuffed animal that some police officer had given her. Her expression reflected relief, but also exhaustion. Lucas came over and sat next to her. "We did it," he said, his voice low but loaded with emotion. Helena nodded slowly. "For now, but this doesn't end here." Lucas looked at Maria, who was now laughing with a nurse. Something about her innocent joy reminded him of Sofia, but it also made him think. He had lost his daughter 10 years ago, but that night he had gained something unexpected. A connection with Maria and Helena, who were now part of his life. Days later, Lucas returned to the hospital, resuming his routine with a new perspective. Although the investigation into Sofia continued, he allowed himself to enjoy small moments with Maria, who increasingly accepted him as a close figure. On more than one occasion, he found himself telling her stories while she drew, or simply listening to her laughter filling the hospital hallways. Anne, for her part, remained a pillar of support. She, who had doubted his actions at first, now encouraged him to continue. On a quiet afternoon, she told him, "Lucas, what you have done has changed lives, including yours. Don't stop, but don't forget to enjoy what you have now." Helena also began a new chapter. Although she was still dealing with the shadows of her past, she found in Lucas and Anna a support network she had never had before. She decided to be honest with Maria about her history, explaining that although they did not share the same blood, she would always be her mother. One afternoon, while Lucas was reviewing the notebook in his office, he received an unexpected call. It was an investigator assigned to the case. They had found clues in another city based on the information in the notebook. It was not a certainty, but it was a new path that could lead him to Sofia. That evening, Lucas met Helena and Anna at their home. He shared the news with them, and they both encouraged him to continue. Helena, holding Maria's hand, said to him, "No matter how much time passes, if there is hope, you must hold on to it." The next day, Lucas walked to the city's lookout point, where the lights flickered in the distance. His heart was filled with determination. The search for Sofia continued, but now he had something more. A renewed purpose, a makeshift family, and a strength he hadn't felt in years. As the sun set on the horizon, Lucas held Maria's pendant in his hands, the golden reflection illuminating her face. He took a deep breath and muttered to himself, "I won't give up, Sofia. I never will." Luke's story teaches us that perseverance and the search for truth can guide us even through the darkest of times. Facing his past and the limits of his ethics led him not only to discover more about his lost daughter, but also to form new connections and understand the value of not giving up. Now the question is for you, what would you have done in his place? How far would you go for the people you love? Click on the video that appears on the screen to continue this reflection and delve into a new story full of teachings and emotions. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this one. See you in the next video, where we continue exploring the depths of the soul and the lessons that life offers us. Until next time.